So the next thing that we are going to be diving into is really having a sense of self-respect. Coming into your power means setting a new standard, having boundaries, not being a doormat, not people-pleasing, not over-functioning, right? And part of why I love helping women start businesses is because really it has nothing to do with the business. It's like starting a business, starting a podcast. These things are better than therapy because they will force you to face your shit. And it's such an incredible opportunity to see reflected back all the things that get in your way. And it's an opportunity to set them down. And that is worth the whole thing. So the two women that I'm going to call up in 1 second are really walking examples of what true strength, I think, looks like. And they give all of us permission to love ourselves truly on a deeper level and set a new standard and learn who has access to us and learn what it means to truly open your heart and at the same time feel that you take care of yourself the whole time. And there's reciprocity in your life, and that your cup is super full, because self-worth is ultimately what's driving everything in your life is a reflection of your relationship to your own self-love. And so I'm really happy that they're here. I'm happy to have this conversation. So Patrice Washington and Terri Cole, please come out here. Love these women so much. So, yeah, I mean, you heard a little bit of what I was talking about, and those are the conversations that not only have we had, but it is truly a badge of honor to have crossed the ocean to being in integrity with yourself. I interviewed Cheryl Strayed, who wrote the book Wild, and she went on this 1,100-mile walk on the Pacific Crest Trail. And she said, mile by mile, I walked home to myself. And she said, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. But when I got to the end of that trail, I came home to loving myself. And she said, the most wild thing you'll ever do is come to love everything about yourself. It's amazing. So I feel like the two of you, in your own unique ways, really call women up with that being the assignment. It's like, all right, let's take a look. So let's talk a little bit about what that means to you, true self-love, and why on earth do you think that that makes an impact in having influence? Why on earth does that have an impact in your bank account? Why does that ultimately help pave the way in your business and in everything that you're doing?
That was so good. That's like the first question. Golly, I thought you were like, tell the audience about your podcast. No. Okay. Okay. So for me in this season, and I would say just thinking about the quote you just shared, for me, launching my podcast in 2017, episode by episode, interview by interview, conversation by conversation, book by book, I came home to myself. I really did. When I launched the podcast, I was known as a financial expert on a nationally syndicated radio show. And I just launched a podcast because they said, hey, if you have a podcast, we can monetize your radio segment. And I was like, makes sense. I'll start next year. And they were like, well, we would need it in 3 weeks. So I literally only had 3 weeks to put together the Redefining Wealth podcast, and had no idea that it would take me on such a journey of self-discovery. I thought I was just showing up as a financial expert. And what I became was best friends and girlfriends with my audience so we could grow together.
Oh, I love that.
That's what it was. And in the process, I learned self-love was radical honesty, because I had learned before launching this podcast, and even though I had a successful business back in the day and had done all these incredible things, I had learned that to earn love from other people, you had to be who they wanted you to be. So I had learned to be very performative and not necessarily authentic. And that was from my parents, from my family, from school, like all the things. And the more, episode by episode, conversation after conversation, interview after interview, book after book, I was starting to just shed all of these ideas, thoughts, beliefs that allowed me to be more radically honest with myself about my needs, wants, and desires. And so as that started to happen, I was also doing what my first grade teacher, Ms. Boynton, said. When you learn something, you have a responsibility to share with your friends.
So good.
And so my podcast audience just became the friends I was sharing with. And I never shared it from the perspective of, oh, I've mastered all the things. I would say, here's what I'm considering. As I experience this thing, here's what I'm reflecting on. Here's what I'm considering. Here are the exercises that I'm doing. And I hope it serves you too.
I love that line because it's really helpful. Mm-hmm. Here's what I'm considering.
Here's what I'm considering. Yeah. I'm not saying you need to do this. These are the questions I'm asking myself. If it serves you, take them. If it doesn't, come back next week. Maybe something else will serve you. And here we are almost 7 years later. But yeah.
Amazing. And I love when you shared that line about learning my needs, wants, and desires. And it's like, we're sitting here shaking our head like, we want that for her. You don't necessarily do that for yourself, but as soon as she says it, you're like, that makes all the sense in the world that you would have needs, wants, and desires. We want you to have them. We're just like, when was the last time I even considered what mine are? And if that's even permissible for me to think about that. So, Terri, let's have this conversation a little bit with you in the sense of like, you came into my life and that first conversation we had, it like hit me like a freight train. I was like, you actually were the first person who said the word to me. You said, you're an over-functioning codependent. And I was like, oh, that's a thing? Because I thought codependents were like, I'm needy, I need this and you were like, or you're the one who can't help yourself, you have to take care and rescue everyone, which is also a form of control. So you started to help break through to me how I was just not loving myself, abandoning myself, being hypervigilant, hyper-functioning, and how exhausting that is. Do you want to talk about what self-love can look like and where sometimes we don't realize we're being over-functioners and not having needs, wants, and desires?
Sure.
This is what I do all day long. Stick around.
Bring it. I mean, part of the thing about being a high-functioning codependent, because that's what you're talking about, and that's what I'm talking about, and I have a book coming out in October, and that's what it's about, because it's hidden. And just like you, Kath, it wasn't just you. I mean, my own whole entire audience is like, codependency, what? I'm the one doing all the things. I'm making all the dough. I'm making all the decisions. I'm managing all the people and all the carpooling and all the things. So I think there's confusion about what it means to be codependent. But the self-abandonment that you were talking about is this key element that I see in my therapy clients and that I experience myself. Because again, what do we say? You teach what you most need to learn yourself, right? Why am I interested in spreading the good news that it doesn't have to be this way? Because it was that way for me as well. And in the self-abandonment, what ends up happening is that no matter, even though we're building something beautiful, even though we're building a beautiful life, but we're not enjoying it, we don't feel fulfilled. Those behaviors where you may know your wants, needs, and desires, but you're not negotiating for them. You're not sharing them with other people. You're not telling the truth about how you feel. That is a one-way ticket to Bitterland. There's literally no other stops on that train, just one. That's just sooner or later, you end up resenting the crap out of the people in your life and feeling like, oh, if my boss just wasn't an idiot, and if my boyfriend was less selfish, and if my friend didn't betray me, and that was me in my 20s, being like, well, if everyone else would just get their shit together, it'd all be fine, you know? And yet the reality is, of course, I had a therapist who was like, who's the common denominator in all those relationships? I'm like, oh my God, I'm the problem. It's me? What? Like, is that possible? And I think that this is so much more common than we think. And Cathy shared something that was really so pivotal for so many of my therapy clients and women in my mastermind and all the things, is the control piece. Because where high-functioning codependency is different than regular codependency is that both of them are an overt or covert bid to control the outcomes, the situations, the feeling states, the circumstances of other people. But as high-functioning codependents, we just make that shit look easy. So nobody's checking on you to be like, gee, I wonder how Betty's doing. They're all like, Betty's fine, she's always fine, right? Is anyone checking? No, nobody's checking. Because we're always the ones who are like, I got it, I got it, I got it. And yet the aspect, one of the most liberating things and one of the biggest self-love actions that I think that we can take is realizing that it's not yours, right? Knowing what is your side of the street and what is someone else's side of the street. And learning to put it down. Mel Robbins has this thing that she says that I like, where she says, let them. Right? Your friend is getting involved with that idiot that you don't like. You just kind of got to let her. I mean, you can just have your peace. You can be like, hi, it makes me nervous. But the reality is, it's an illusion. And the Mel Robbins things made me laugh, the let them, because that's such a high-functioning codependent thing to even think, as if we have the power to let or not let. We're like, I'm still in control. I'm just letting you live your life. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so ironic. But somehow it works to calm your nervous system. Think about it right now. Think about something that you're carrying. And when you think about let them, you're like, oh, there's a relief. So ultimately, with this self-love that we're talking about, you need to learn to let the chips fall where they may, especially when they're not your effing chips. And that's the thing that we got to realize, that not everyone's chips are our chips. You get it?
Oh my God, clap for that. That's so big. You know, it's truly fascinating because sometimes you hear something so often you don't hear it anymore. It's like there's a scene in the movie The Blues Brothers where the guy walks in and this guy lives like right next to the elevated train, the L. And he's like, oh my God, the train. He goes, it comes so often I don't even hear it anymore. You know, like, and the whole house is like shaking. It's like, what? I don't even notice, you know? There are certain terms we throw around so often that we're really not getting it because you just hear it so often it loses any power. So for instance, these two words put together, self-love. It's like, all right, got it, love yourself. But you don't. You don't. You didn't get the message. No, you really don't. You ain't got none of it. You know what I mean? Like, we gotta come correct. What the hell is happening here? So Patrice, let's go back to this. Like, that is major. The reason I'm saying this to you is because every ounce of you communicates to me that you do have that. And this is it. Outsourcing that love never actually works. And then it gets us into a lot of issues because we're constantly searching for wholeness somewhere outside of us. So I don't know if you feel like sharing it. You certainly don't have to, but you shared it on my podcast, a little bit about how you felt about yourself growing up and how there was like a major, just giant, colossal, Herculean way in which you rose into fully coming to love yourself. But what does that actually mean? If somebody's heard those words, but they don't really embody it, what does it mean for you that you came to learn to love yourself and that changed your life as a result?
Mm-hmm. So I grew up here in South Central Los Angeles in the 80s, where it was not cute to be chocolate. It was the worst thing you could be, is to come out as a chocolate girl. And I was told every day, not just at school, but by people in my family, the people who were supposed to love you and protect you, that I was the ugly one. So I was constantly teased and, ridiculed, and your lips are too big, your cheeks are too big, your eyes are too wide, like everything that you could pick apart. And then I was the tallest girl and the skinniest. So imagine walking around sucking my lips in, like tucking them in like this all the time. All the pictures of me when I was younger look like that, shrinking. So I didn't seem as tall, putting on extra clothes, so I didn't seem as skinny. So I went for years just thinking that God made a mistake. Like, why do I look like this and other people in my family look like that? Like, what's wrong with me? And I was 22 years old when I started therapy. And I was 25 years old before I could look in the mirror without cringing and wishing that I was somebody else or that I looked like something different. And when people would say to me, like, oh, you're so pretty, I'm like, why? I felt like it was a cruel thing to say. Like, I did not understand. Like, I couldn't receive it. So I'm 25 before I can look in the mirror without cringing. And therapy is where I learned to forgive people who would never say I'm sorry. Therapy is where I learned a new definition of forgiveness, which was giving up the possibility of a better past. So not rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing. And it's where I learned that hurt people really do hurt people. And it actually gave me compassion for the women in my family who made me feel this way at that time. And so one of the practices that I had was just to get in the mirror. One of the therapists suggested this and affirm things about myself and talk to myself. And of course, when I first started, I was like, this is some bullshit. But, but I also was like, I will trust the process. And so I started to speak nicely to myself. I started to speak kindly to myself. When the things would come up, I would try to reframe. When something would come up, I would reframe, and coincidentally, now there's a lot of people paying for these lips, so we'll just, I was like, and apparently cheekbones, because I've been asked, like, what do you put in your cheeks? I was like, what do you mean? What do I put in my cheek? I don't even understand. I didn't know people put things in their cheeks.
You're like, my bones?
Yeah. My mama's jeans. No. So I developed a bunch of practices throughout the years, and I think I felt a little emotional because I have a 16-year-old daughter. And I was just talking to Terri about her backstage, and she is the light of my life and the sweetest thing. Like, so funny, so compassionate, so wise, like all the things. And from the time she was little, like, I grew up with people calling me thunder thighs and telling me I was fat. I was never overweight, but I had big thighs. And so all the things, I was skinny with big thighs. It was, all the things. My daughter's built just like me. And from the time that she was little, I go, oh, look at your athletic build. Come on, legs. Like, I would just gas her up like, I see you. Because I didn't wear shorts. I mean, literally, there were so many things that I did to cover up, to hide, does anybody else know what I'm saying? Like, to cover up, to hide, like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with this? There was always something. And so to watch this 16-year-old girl, I wish you would tell my daughter she wasn't cute. I wish you would, to see that even over these last 7 years, episode by episode, conversation by conversation, the seeds that I've been able to plant in her just through being around, just through hearing, just through her sometimes picking up the books that I'm reading and reading one page. We have no idea the impact and the ripple effect of this work that we get to do in the world and how we have no idea. And so now I'm like watching this 16-year-old girl who could very well parent me. You guys are laughing. I'm not even laughing. She is so wise. I listen to the things that she says to. I was just telling you, I walk by her room and she's on the phone. Oh, people need to treat you how you want to be treated, not how they feel like. She's like counseling her friends. Like, there are girls at our house laid out. No, you need to say that is not how you will speak to me. You need to say, and she's telling your kids this, if you live in Alpharetta, Georgia, telling your kids this. But here's the thing. I think to myself sometimes, if I didn't go on this journey and I didn't go on this path, like, she wouldn't be this person who was already at 16 years old, like, sending out these signals and sprinkling these seeds all about. And I also think to myself, if I were her at 16, I would have never met her because her father would have not been the one. But I needed him to have her.
That's right.
So I don't weaponize who I am today against former versions of myself.
Yeah, right on.
Either. That's what this has taught me. I love me at 43, and I love the 35-year-old version of me that created a prayer room. I love the 32-year-old version of me that, started to really get heavy into personal development. I love the 25-year-old version of me that really stuck to therapy. I love all these versions of myself because without her, I wouldn't be me. Right. And those practices had to develop over time, and they only continue to grow.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And the piece about your daughter is the most magical part because your legacy is her, and for kids, it's not what you're teaching, it's what they're catching, like what's caught, not what's taught. My husband and I went to a weekend of like marriage, like therapy, couples retreat recently, and the therapist had these Russian nesting dolls, and she took out all the little dolls inside, and she said, each of us is every age that we've ever been. And depending on how we're feeling in a moment, or depending on how we get triggered, like the 8-year-old in you sort of like shows up and reacts, or the, 24-year-old in you. And she said that's why it's like loving all of those parts of yourself is so important. And you want your partner to do that. But your partner is all those little ages of themselves as well. And so sometimes you're seeing the 9-year-old version of him, or you're seeing the 17-year-old version of him, right? And ultimately, the only one who's going to love all those versions of you is you and God. Like that kind of full acceptance, right? It's got to come from inside. But she also said in that Russian doll set, the biggest one, if the littlest one is you at like 2 and it keeps going, she said maybe the biggest one is who you're becoming. And that woman is also part of you, the wise woman. And so I love that in this moment, we can kind of see both of those women right here. It's like you've stepped into the wise woman. But we don't have to wait till we're 85 to be that wise woman. We can give ourselves permission to be that person right now. And Terri, I think part of what you do is you sort of compress those decades into days by giving people tools, because boundaries is active self-love. No doubt. Let's talk about what does it mean to even have boundaries or set them so that you can have the kind of self-love that not only does she have, but her daughter is teaching people about. So help us understand, what does that even mean? How do we spot whether we have them or not? Do we have boundaries? Do we not? Do we need more of them? Mm-hmm. And how can we actually have enough self-love to give ourselves permission to set them?
Well, let's start with what they are, because I think there's a lot of confusion about what they are. So I want you to think about boundaries as your own personal rules of engagement. That's it. Just lets people know what's okay with you and what's not okay with you. That's in its simplest form. And then according to me, your boundaries are made up of your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers, like your non-negotiables in your relationships. And it's not enough to just know them, which most of the people in my therapy practice come in and don't know them, because we're so outwardly focused. We know the preferences of the people in our life. You think that's accurate? We know the limits of the people in our life. These are things we do not know, many of us, about ourselves. So you need to identify them, and then you need to have the ability to clearly and concisely and transparently communicate them, which therein really lies the rub for most people, who are like, even if I know it, do I have the courage to say it? What are they going to do? I don't have the words. I don't know how to do it. So I think that we can start with, if you're wondering, do I need boundaries? Where do I need boundaries? We can do a quick resentment inventory, which will help you know where you would need some boundaries. Because when we feel resentment, and you guys, you know it right now, just write it on a piece of paper. Who came into your mind? What are you holding on to resentment about? So that's either where you need a boundary that you haven't set, a boundary that you have set is being violated, or in some way a need is not getting met in you, and this produces the feeling of resentment. So once you go, oh, wow, look, I'm doing my list of resentments, and it's like, this sister is on this list 4 times. Like, there's something with this relationship. Then you have to go, what? What is it? So in Boundary Boss, my first book, I wrote a story about one of my sisters who I'm very close to, but she would always use my key to my apartment in New York and come take my friggin' clothes. And then not, listen, I don't mind sharing, but just fucking tell me. So I'm not looking for some shit that's not there, right? Where I'm like, where is that blazer, you know? And then I see her out with her friends. I'm like, oh, it's on that bitch right there. Okay, so. Cool. So I was resentful because she was taking my clothes and not telling me. And when you're setting boundaries, you identify what it is, and then I would have to identify, well, what do I need to do? Well, I need to let her know it's not okay. I had let her know it's not okay, but she still kept violating that boundary. So then I had to set a consequence for her. If you take my crap again without telling me, I'm going to take my key back. And I didn't end up having to take the key back because after I threatened to take the key back, she stopped taking my clothes without asking. So in your life, you have to look at those people who are on your resentment list and go, what is it? Why am I resentful? And what is my 50% of this dysfunctional dance? Because no matter how bad someone else's behavior may be, I'm not saying your boss or your boyfriend or your girlfriend is not an idiot. Maybe they are. But really what you care about is what is your 50%? How are you participating? Because it can only be 50-50. That's it. This makes up the whole of what the dance is. So you really have to look like, did I kind of know this was happening, but I didn't say anything? What red flags have I been ignoring?
I'm going to add.
Please do. I want you to right now. Go.
So a practice that I have is Sherry Salata taught me the term governing decisions. And so I think sometimes when we're even writing the people on the list, we think that because of their proximity or their relationship to us, they're like, well, that's my mom. So when she said her sister, how many of you were like, your sister, not your sister? I could never tell my sister, right? I learned that if I have governing decisions about how I want to be treated or respected, for me, that's first. Like, I don't want to be spoken to in this way. Like, you will not raise your voice at me, right? So now, whether you're my mama or my sister or a romantic partner or a friend, my governing decision is that when people raise their voice, I exit the conversation. Yeah. So no matter who it is, this is what it is, right? Because I've tried to do, and I was doing it like, but that's my brother, that's my this, that's my that. And when I just came to like, first, these are the governing decisions. And now if you find yourself over here, you're going to get told. So you want to stay over there. If you find yourself over here, I'm going to have to tell you about it. But
you're talking about, you're not, so for you, governing decision is sort of the same as the non-negotiable, no matter who it is. And I love that. I also talk about who's in your VIP section, right? Because this is the same thing, Patrice, where people feel like in the VIP section of my life, just think about it like the VIP section of a club. But imagine that you're the only bouncer, that you made the guest list. And if you're not checking who's coming in and out, then you got any mother effer sitting in your VIP section who does not belong there, right? And this could be family, because it's really about who has the privilege to be close to your most tender heart. Who is safe? Who are emotionally safe people? They're the only people who should be in your VIP section, no matter how you're related to whom.
That's good. Yeah.
It's interesting, and I want to talk a little bit about how this relates to everything, right? Including money, which is part of what Patrice talks about, is like really what is underneath wealth. Like, what is wealth showing you that was already the symptom that was somewhere else, right? And what I have come to find out is that if everything really is a reflection of your own relationship to your own self-love, I have seen it over and over again in my life where I check myself and look at what I'm holding or what's happening in my business and how that's a direct relation to what I'm familiar with being codependent, not in my business. And so I remember, Patrice, when one of the first conversations we had, you were like, I meet all these women who like volunteer at church and they like spend extra time and they're really good and they're really sweet. And then they're wondering why like they can't make money and they just have there's no reciprocity, familiarity. Like they just don't have a sense of feeling ever reciprocity and fullness. So can you talk about that and how any of this could possibly relate to money? Because we don't see how they're related, but they are.
Oh, that's all I talk about. I love it. Okay, so the foundation of redefining wealth is understanding that wealth is so much more than money and material possessions. So we see that as the definition, but the truth is the original 12th century definition of wealth is the condition of well-being and happiness. It was never cars. It was never money. It was never houses. It was well-being and happiness. And we completely abandoned that in the pursuit of chasing more money. all while like not making sure that we are well in all these other parts of our lives. And so at Redefining Wealth, the 6 pillars are based on all the other parts of life that impact your finances, even when you're not thinking about it. So we have a responsibility and a duty to deal with those things. There's a young woman, Monique Coleman. She was in High School Musical. She came on. You remember Monique? Yeah. She came on the Redefining Wealth podcast some years ago, and she shared this statement. That someone told her, your business will only grow to the extent you're willing to heal.
Oh my God, write that down. So
your
good.
business.
We're all in this together.
Your business will only grow to the extent you are willing to heal. And so at Redefining Wealth, what we work on are healing our relationship with each one of these pillars so we can clear out the clutter and actually step into the things that we say we want with money. And so often I've told people, you don't have a budgeting problem, you have a boundary problem. Everybody is on the budget except for the things you say you need, want, and desire, right? Like you're lending money to people who you know are not going to pay you back and then acting upset. You knew she wasn't going to pay you back.
Yeah, do me a favor. Stop doing that.
Yeah, just stop, right? Doesn't work. So the 5 pillars before money, real quick. Fit. Fit is about becoming your best self. It's about being mentally and physically well. Oftentimes we are praying for things we don't have the mental capacity to sustain. That's the truth. If we got it right now, we wouldn't know how to sustain it. We are praying. I used to have this thing, God, enlarge my territory. I want to go all over the world. And my spirit said, but you can't breathe right here. I was out of breath going up and down my townhome in Beverly Hills because I was running myself into the ground in the name of purpose. I was like, oh, I'm on my hustle and grind. This is what you have to do. In the name of purpose, I will do all the things. I end up at Cedars-Sinai in the ER. I thought I had food poisoning. And the guy goes, you have way more issues than food poisoning. I said, sir, watch your mouth, right? So it ended up being that my hemoglobin levels, like I think a woman of childbearing age is like 12 and above. I was like 4.8. I was running on fumes. And the guy's like, well, didn't you listen to the symptoms? Well, what are the symptoms? Fatigue. I'm on my hustle and grind. I'm supposed to be fatigued, you know? He's like listing things. I had completely ignored it because I thought I was doing the right thing, taking care of everyone else and putting myself bottom of the list, right? I would never let my daughter like have all these symptoms and just let it go. But I did it to myself. So fit pillar, if we say that we have a vision for our lives, it's our duty and responsibility to protect the only vessel we're going to get to execute the vision. It's our duty and responsibility. People pillar, creating relationships that matter. This is where we go into governing decisions, standards, boundaries, all the things, and making sure that we honor the relationships in our lives that matter. Some of us don't even have the capacity to fully do the thing with the podcast, the business, the vision, because we carry mom guilt. Some of that mom guilt comes from when you are in your children's presence, you're not present. We're not even present. We're there, but we're like doing all the things. We're scrolling and doing all. My daughter taught me this. She's like 5, 6 years old, telling me a long-winded story. You know what I'm talking about. Kids tell those long stories. So, you know it. So I'm looking at the phone and I'm smiling and nodding my head. And she said, Mommy, this is not a smiley story. Yeah. And I realized that in her presence, I was not practicing presence. So that's what taught me to start putting the phone away and just being fully present. Now, when I go out, I can be fully present because I already know she's good because I'm fully present at home when I'm with her. So that gave me the freedom to do the things to make the money when I was out. I could go all in. I didn't have that guilt in the back of my head. Third pillar, space, setting up your environment to support you. When I first started writing books many years ago, it was in the office where everything went to die. No, you know what I'm talking about. The spare bedroom where there's also an ironing board and all the Amazon packages go. They go to die. And like all the things are there. So I'm in that room and I'm like, this is my writing time. I'm going to be disciplined. This is my writing time. And I can't think of shit to write. Like I'm just sitting there. And my spirit said, is this the space of a best-selling author? No, where you were creating your podcast, where you were doing your work, is that a space that you would imagine Cathy Heller in? Is it a space? Now, I don't know what Cathy's space looks like. I'm just saying.
You were there on Sunday.
Right? But I'm just saying, even if you have a picture in your mind, when I think of someone who was doing the things that I desire to do, I wasn't treating myself like that woman. I wasn't treating my space with that level of respect. I wasn't seeing that I was allowing all of this clutter, which, by the way, means clutter is the physical manifestation of chaos in your mind. So whenever we can't think, it's usually because something is getting trapped in all the stuff. So that's the space pillar. And so that setting up your life to support the money you say you desire. Fourth is faith, believing in something greater. Don't care what you say you believe in. Make time to practice it. Resilience is necessary on this journey. None of us are here because it's been easy, but there's been something in our spirits that say keep going. Well, you have to make time to listen to that spirit. Most of us are so busy looking at one YouTube video after another. Please continue to watch mine. I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm just saying most of us are so busy doing all the things that we don't make time to get still and do the practices and have those moments. And a lot of times is we don't want to hear what's going to come up because it'll force us to do something different. But the faith pillar, right? And then work pillar, live your life's purpose. Doesn't mean you have to do this full time, but you need to be able to express it. One of the things I've picked up with an MBA in financial psychology and behavioral finance, if you are unfulfilled in what you do day in and day out, you are going to find a way to self-sabotage. It will continue to create a void, and most people try to fill that void with buying things and buying people. So, of course, you're not going to have the money to invest in the things that you say you want. You're too busy buying friends. You could be buying a podcast mic, but you over here buying drinks on a Friday, right? And like, did that hit home? Somebody said, did it hit home? Right.
Oh my God.
But you're doing whatever.
Too soon?
And the final pillar is then money. And so I really believe that when we do the things to start clearing these things out, now you have the capacity to do the simple things with money that we've all heard over and over again. It's not that you're not brilliant enough to do it because you guys are all brilliant. It's because we're so distracted by all the other things and all these other pillars. And so to answer your question, bring it all the way back. There's so many other things that we could be doing that will directly impact our finances or indirectly impact our finances. It's never, I just don't earn enough. No, now we got to go back to the fifth pillar. You have a belief around what it takes to do this. So I hope that helps somebody.
That was huge. Don't you feel like you need to listen to that on a repeat? Yeah. It's huge. I love what you were saying when you were asking God, like, give me more territory. And you're like, I can barely breathe with what I have. Yeah. And I love when you said that, like, you need to create the vessel, right, to be able to handle. You couldn't right now sustain the thing that you think you're dreaming of. Like, we have to create it, which is why it goes back to, and you said this to me the other day, like, people think they want money when really they want significance. So the world just keeps saying, if you want significance, you'll have to go make more money. But the bottom line is that the significance will never come from that. It's only going to come from doing those pillars. That's where all the significance comes from, and cleaning up all that stuff.
I feel significant just by the way my daughter looks at me and talks to me. If you guys never oohed, awed, or clapped for me again, I know that I came here and did what I was supposed to do. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's not this, the fact, like, what we desire is the money. We say money because we don't have a way of saying the other things. It's really what we think money can create. So it's the joy we think money can create. Well, how do you use those pillars to create joy now? Oh, I think money can buy, me more love. How do you start to feel and express love using those pillars as a framework now? Joy. How do you, right? So I go through that all the time with myself. What do I feel like I need right now? I want more joy. Chasing more money is not going to necessarily create joy because I'm a natural overthinker. So I'll make shit harder than it has to be in a second. But I can create more joy, like by looking at the fifth pillar. How do I create more joy? Let me invite my friends on a hike or to go see a waterfall with me instead of going to dinner again. Mm-hmm. Or how do I create joy spending time watching, what is it? Love is Blind. Y'all know that last season was good. Reagan and I, that was how we created a lot of joy in our house, right? But how do I create that feeling of joy and then harness all of that to bring it to my work? Right. And now when I'm with my clients or I'm on stage or I'm doing whatever I'm doing, the joy and the confidence and all that, I'm already practicing that in all these other parts of my life.
Yeah. And it shows up. Before when Terri was talking about boundaries, I was like hearing it through this version of me, but I was also hearing it through a past version of me. And it's one thing to hear it, but to really embody it those are two totally different things, obviously, right? You've taken a bunch of notes here, but it's like to actually go implement them is so different than hearing what it is. And a couple weeks ago, I was in Florida for spring break with my kids, and I had been in therapy since I'm 15, and I've been so aware of a way in which I completely abandoned myself with my dad. It started showing up in my life, and it showed up in my business, and it was like literally 3 weeks ago in spring break, we were at home, and my dad's really sick, and I was telling my therapist, and she was like, you have it in you to speak truth to power. You have it in you. And I was like, oh my gosh, can I do this? I don't think I can do this. And I told her, I can't do this. And then something happened, and I woke up like a jolt at 6 a.m. And I was like, today's the day. And for 4 hours, like I thought it would be 20 minutes. I wasn't sure what it would be. For 4 hours without yelling, I said, I don't need anything. I don't need you to apologize. I don't need you to change it. Because she said, speaking truth to power is you just say what's true for you, period. You let go of anything you need from everyone else. And so I was like, here's what it is. And my dad was willing and able to just listen. And then I realized that it was actually very loving to do that, because when you're not being yourself, there's no intimacy. You're not even there. So he felt closer to me than probably he's ever had, because I kind of gave the opportunity for him to have empathy for me. And it was cathartic for him on some level, but it didn't matter anyway, because I didn't go in needing him to change it. But the best part was the next day, I literally felt 1 pound. I felt light as a feather. I was like, oh my God. I was like, I can do anything. That felt like literally picking up and moving a mountain. And so I'm listening to you say that. And like when you say that, it's easy for you to say, but I hear the voices in some of the heads in this room saying, no, I won't say that to my sister. No, I won't set a boundary. I hear that you think it's good for me, but it's not happening. And what I'm here to say is the day after I did that, the feeling I felt, the bigness I felt, the feeling of coming right with myself. There's no accomplishment I've ever had that has ever felt that good. I was like, oh my God, what else can I step up to? Who else can I speak truth to power? I was like, just going to start doing it all the time, because everything you think is going to give you that, nothing comes close to that moment where you're like, I'm not abandoning myself today.
It's exactly what I was going to say, Kat, that is the definition of not self-abandoning, with going into a situation without the end result as your desired result. Like, they're going to accept, I'm going to confront my father, he's going to cry, and he's going to be sorry, and then I'm going to feel better. My therapist had me, I did something similar with my father, but her whole thing was, Terri, remember, your healing is in the sharing. Your healing is in the asking. Your healing is in the conversation. It's not what the other person does, because what you're saying to yourself and the universe is that I matter. Because ultimately, what we're really talking about with self-love is that you have to think that what you think, how you feel, and what you want has to matter to you more than what anyone else wants, thinks, or feels. And we are trained to think that that is selfish, and it's not true. This is mentally healthy. This is you being able to not self-abandon and then not put that resentment on other people. Right? When we self-abandon, then we blame them. But it's really us, and we have the power to stop.
Question for you around this is, all of this is also related totally to the codependency people feel in, I'm afraid to be visible because what if people comment this? I want everyone to like me. That's being codependent. You want to control how people perceive you. You want to be able to control the way that people respond. And then, so you'll sit it out because you don't know how to deal with the codependency. And being visible like you are, I'm sure that you've had to just let that go. Like, it would be impossible to speak and to post and to share and to publish things if you allowed that to run amok in your mind. So how do you help people to do that too?
So 2 things I'll say. One is, when I look at my life today and national television and stages and my face on book covers and all of these things. I just think, had I not gone back to therapy or gone to therapy and dealt with that childhood trauma, where would I be?
You wouldn't be doing that.
I definitely wouldn't be doing this. If I was too afraid and ashamed to show my face to people that made the face. I mean, seriously. I'm talking about my grandmother was the main culprit. My maternal grandmother who raised me was the main person who made me feel ugly. So had I not gone to do that work and deal with that childhood trauma and develop compassion and all those things, one, I would have never been here. I could have never gotten here, because how could I take ridicule from absolute strangers online? And when I first got started in radio, Cathy, I don't know if I told you this story. Before I was actually in radio, I had pitched a segment to a radio station in the Midwest. It was like a Money Minute thing with Patrice Washington, right? They didn't respond. Finally, I kept following up. The program manager emails back. He says, your voice is hideous. Well, he was talking to my ex-husband. So he's like, well, her voice isn't like quite right. And he used the word hideous in it and all this stuff, right? And so I was deflated. I was mad. I did all the things that we all do. And a few weeks later, I ran into a friend who was a CNN financial analyst. And he's like, yeah, I'm thinking about doing this show. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, I'm just going to pay for it. And I was like, I'll go half with you. Let's co-host. And he's like, okay. We start this radio show in Atlanta. It blows up, that we paid for, that we paid to create. So it prepared me, because I didn't know several months later I would get the call to go on the Steve Harvey show to do my first interview. And so I went on to promote my second book. It was just the interview, and it went so well, they said, can you come back in a couple weeks? And I was like, sure. And then when I came back, they were like, can you come back in a couple weeks? And I was like, sure. And then like the fourth time I was on, Steve was like, the audience likes you. You should just come on every week. And I was like, you're right. I'll be back. And so I ended up getting on for 4 years. And then the television show as well. I was on every month, right? For years. And so I just say that to say, where would I be had I not done the work to prepare me for when that next person had the audacity to say, your voice is hideous? This is what I've learned. Thank you.
That's an incredible story.
This is what I've learned, though. Everyone in the audience is not necessarily my assignment. This is the thing that's kept me podcasting and kept me going, even when people have said not nice things to me. The definition of audience is an assembly of onlookers. People have a right to look at anything that we put out into the universe, right? That's not behind a gated thing. Like, they have the right. And they have the right to think your voice is hideous. They have the right to not like what you're saying. They have a right to not like your positioning, your message, any of those things. That is okay. We are here for the people who are assigned to us. Assignments are people who you lock arms with. I'm not concerned about onlookers. I'm here to show up for the people who are designed and assigned to me in this season so we can lock arms and do life together. That's it.
Awesome.
Love it.
I love you both so much. Aren't they incredible? So you know what's so interesting is, like, it's not like you guys are like a duo. You know, you have your own lives, but like you really work together as this could be like a on tour coming to a theater near you. It's so good. Tell everybody where they can follow you both.
Not on Instagram, because I'm sick of them. So we now have the Redefining Wealth app. So I'll be doing live coaching and all the things in the Redefining Wealth app, and patricewashington.com. And for more, we have Redefining Wealth Live in October in Atlanta for anyone who wants to come.
Yes.
We'll be actually doing the work, like in the room.
I love. That's going to be amazing.
You guys can find me on Instagram. I have not quit them yet. And we also have something special for you guys. You could just go to terricole.com/Cathy with a C. And there'll be a link to a free training about father wounds that I'm doing. Who might think they have a father wound? Anybody? Oh, look at that, my mind, I don't. Anyway, so it's a free training I'm doing starting on the 29th. So we'll have a bunch of information and some gifts for you guys there. terricole.com/Cathy.
You guys are exquisite. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Amazing.